How we doing?
Great. What's up, Zach?
Hey, Pete, good to see you, man.
Awesome.
Likewise.
Thanks for joining us, guys. Of course, we're here today for a fireside chat with Zach Miller. Of course, every time before we kick things off, want to start us off with a quick icebreaker. So, I'm gonna pass this question over to you first, Pete. What do you like to do when it's like a nice hot summer day?
I think probably like the biggest thing that I've got going on there is my now 6-year-old was 5-year-old is just like water obsessed. So if it's gonna be a hot summer day, we're gonna be like at a pool somewhere. We don't have a pool here at our place in San Francisco, but so we're gonna seek one out, right? So that's gonna be the requirement there. What about you, Zach?
Oh, fun memories, man. Remembering when my kids were little like that in Phoenix and we had a pool. And yes,
Mm,
pool was it.
that'd
But
be required in Phoenix. Jeez
oh,
Louise.
totally. Like
Yeah.
you don't know hot till it's 115, right? But yeah, I'd say like these days, a whole lot of nothing. Like if I can sit in the shade with a cool beverage, that's about it, right? That's sort of the dream. So
Yeah. Well, and you have to be careful too, because in Seattle, there's only like 5 of those days a year,
yeah,
right?
exactly. And if you exert yourself, you might, you know, I don't know, get yourself in trouble. Right.
You're out of practice. What about you, Elliot?
Yeah, I'm kind of aligned with Zach here. I'll start things off with like a nice little walk, but then I always like post up with at a cute little cafe, get my iced coffee, and just chill in the shade for a little while. That's how I like to spend my mornings when it's nice and hot out. It does seem like we have a few more folks in. Thanks guys for sharing your answers there. Gonna kick things off. Of course, today's event is brought to you by the team here at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you who aren't familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they'd struggle to solve on their own and help them see around corners that they may not know about. We do that through live sessions like this, an online forum, and our quarterly summits. If you're not already a part of the community, you can be invited to join after this event. And before we dive into the event, just to go over a few housekeeping notes, this event is being recorded. You can be able to access this recording and key takeaways on the previous events page of the MSP website. Second, if there's any questions for our speakers today, please use the Q&A function or the chat, and they're going to do their best to get to them during the event. That's all from me. Pete, gonna let you take things over and introduce yourselves in Atrium. Take care, guys. See you
Nice.
at the end.
Cool. Thanks, Elliot. Zach, I'm pumped to have you here. Thank you for joining. Hey, everyone. For folks who are not familiar, this event is sponsored by Atrium. So, for those who don't know, Atrium makes what we call a sales effectiveness platform that helps organizations more effectively manage their staff and improve rep behavior through the better application of data. And really the purpose of that is to produce the best case pipeline they need to hit their numbers by ensuring that their teams are consistently creating and advancing that pipe down the funnel. And the whole idea is to make sure that you never wake up in a new quarter with a light forecast, because we all know how unpleasant that is. Cool. And so for folks who are joining us, if you'd like to would have a giveaway here today. If you'd like to get yourself one of our lovely sales nerd hoodies. I was wearing one earlier, but it's a little warm in San Francisco today, so I took it off. I know that's kind of like an oxymoron, but we're going to go ahead and drop a link here. You can go ahead and grab a hold of that. So a couple of intros. I'll make mine quick since you all are here to talk with or hear from Zach. My name's Pete Kazanji. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. Also, I am a founder of Modern Sales Pros. So, got into sales through my prior software company, TalentBin, where I went from being a business generalist founder to a first seller, sales manager, sales leader. The company was eventually acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014, and then subsequent to that, ended up writing a book on on startup sales called Founding Sales. So that's a little bit on me. Haven't been in the sales game quite as long as our illustrious guest, Zach, here today. So Zach, maybe you can kind of take folks through a little bit of your background so they kind of know the different sales motions that you're familiar with, so on and so forth, before we get into the meat of things.
Sure. Ben, thanks for making me feel old there. That was awesome.
I believe it's seasoned or tenured.
Yeah, it's a
right?
vintage
Seasoned
wine.
Se-
Right. I'm a year 2000 vintage sales guy. So yeah, so I've been doing this for a long time. Everything from individual contributor, back when you had to have a book of maps and quarters in your pocket to call your voicemail. And selling was literally a face-to-face event, right? And then I've led teams, for gosh, I guess close to 18 years now. Teams of teams, teams of teams of teams. Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's been an amazing ride, and watching the transformation from that sort of face-to-face, selling in person to much more digitally focused sales world has been really interesting to watch, and I think is certainly I don't know, it's never a dull moment, right?
Were you in Arizona when you worked at ADP?
Yes.
So many years. Oh my God. So like outside selling, feet on the street.
Yep.
In the like blazing, actually, I mean, ADP is like known as having a banging sales organization and sales training function. Maybe you could share a little bit of that for folks who might not be familiar with like the notion of like selling face to face with a SMB, and then B, what like a big kid sales training function looks like.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it was amazing. I had this old German car at the time. I was
Oh wow.
just married, had an infant, had this old German car. They didn't make great air conditioning in German cars like in the 80s, right? And so I had to bring, and this is like a business professional thing. So it's like shirt and tie, right? And so I had to bring 2-3 shirts with me every day out into the field because you drive around, you get out, and you've got this like wet mark on your back like this. And
you're just in the parking lot going like this, like, all right, I gotta look presentable.
Right, but you got this collection of zip codes, and you're going out to your collection of zip codes, you're trying to find all the businesses that would be a good fit, and you're literally pulling doors. You're back to the office in the evening, following up and calling those business cards that you got and trying to get appointments set up to go back out and have a meeting, You're trying to network with the people in your territory who are selling things that are similar, right? So if you're ADP, you're trying to network with insurance brokers because you're both selling to HR and things like that, right? So anyway, so that was a hoot. The second part of your question, the big kid training program is it's pretty interesting. So even back then, it was well known as sort of like a I don't know, like the place you go to get a degree in sales. Like there was no such thing. Today there's actually a few
100%.
schools where you can do that, right? There's
it's like ADP and like Xerox are like the only ones where
right?
people are like the bang-in sales degrees.
Yeah, and so that was it was a great place to learn, and to describe back then what that program looked like. I think I started and spent 4 weeks in the office with a binder. Like there weren't LMS systems back then, so it was like literally a 3-ring binder. It was like, remember like the 6-inch 3-ring binders, and so you go through and you're learning about
a lot.
Yeah, right. All of the then it was like all of the sort of the product knowledge, right? Like the context and the why the system existed and the history of it and what it did. And then you went off to like a baseline training, and it was a week long when I did it, the first time I did it. And you went to, you flew to corporate, you spent a week in corporate. And it was funny. The first thing that they did when you checked into your hotel, they would hand you a big manila envelope. And for those not familiar, ADP is like a payroll processor, right? Sort of the
Yeah.
original SaaS platform,
Right.
mainframe service bureau computers, right? And so they'd hand you this manila envelope, and inside this manila envelope were like 10 fake time cards, and then like a bunch of pages from an IRS booklet, and then a bunch of like Xerox checks and a bunch of like Xerox payroll ledgers. And you had to literally go through, and between the night when you checked into the hotel at like Sunday night at 6 o'clock, and Monday morning the next morning when you showed up, you had to actually physically sit down with a calculator and a pencil and go through
Awesome.
and calculate a payroll by hand and show up ready to do it, like to present what you did to the instructor in the morning. And if you didn't do it, you got sent home. And so
That's awesome.
what better way to sort of illustrate why people should be using a platform like that than to make somebody go through the exercise of
just
doing
like drag them through the pain,
drag them through the glass themselves and make them experience it. And then like you show up, you're really primed and ready to learn like how to go convince people they shouldn't go through this, act of, dragging themselves across,
I love that. That's fantastic. I mean, we have something a little bit similar here at Atrium as like part of our onboarding is we have like I mean, we don't have a very large sales organization. It's like smaller than 10 people, but we have a, kind of like our Booty LMS onboarding with like, a bunch of hyperlinks to a bunch of classes that have been recorded in Chorus and what have you. But one of them is just to help reps and also CSMs and what have you understand the pain associated with like not only like constructing reporting and visualizations and what have you, but also just interpreting them, right? So we have like I mean, we're not going to train people how to be amazing Salesforce report generators or what have you, because like good luck, right? That would be like 6 months in and of itself. But we also just like have a set of a pre-baked like dashboard. It's like, hey, like let's go through this and figure out what's going on, just so they can understand like, you've got 16 tiles in front of you and trying to create a narrative. Like, how do you do that? And then that helps them really understand the pain of being an SDR manager, an AE manager, or AE director, or whatever, and trying to do that. It's not quite as tedious, I would say, as like what you're describing, but I think that like everyone could really kind of appreciate or think about like how they could do the same thing for their sellers.
Right. Well, if you put a new seller in that mindset of like not just telling them what the problem is that you're solving, but actually make them experience the problem for a minute themselves and think about, geez, how would I solve this problem given this set of tools that I've got? It really, I think it activates that sort of the gap learning concept, right? Like it's really hard for adults to learn something unless there's a reason for it, right? Like I'm not going to learn to be great on the phones unless I got to set appointments for myself, right? I'm not going to learn like about that context and about what the problem is unless I'm sort of in a place where I can experience it and it sort of connects emotionally to what is getting solved.
Yeah. So ADP, good training organization, and also all paper based. A little different now that we have like digital like enablement platforms and what have you. Obviously, you're a little familiar with that vis-a-vis Highspot. How does that change a little bit? Actually, I mean, maybe this would be like okay, so like that was then. This is now. What like maybe you could take folks through how you guys at Highspot do onboarding and enablement. Are there still like giant 3-ring binders? I would imagine.
Probably no, thank goodness.
Thank God.
Yeah, those are hard. Those Staples doesn't stock those anymore. I don't think.
Yeah, good point.
But no. Well, it was funny. I even saw transformation over the time at ADP, where by the time I went from the SMB group to go start selling in their large account group, they actually did have LMS systems. So then I would get there was like CDs, and you have to put the CDs, and then you go click through the LMS classes there, right?
Oh my gosh!
And the funny thing is, it was still really compelling because they were thinking first about the content and the learning, and then they adapted that to the technology that made it more efficient, right? And I think today there's obviously amazing technologies to make the learning more efficient, right? To make it so that when you're sitting, in your home office, because the whole world went to home offices, right?
Right.
That you can participate in that. You don't have to get on a plane and fly to New Jersey or something like this, right?
Right.
But I think if companies fail to think about the actual content that's going into it, the training, the learning, and that they don't do a great job of filling the platforms, that can be problematic. But to answer your question, yeah, I mean, today the Highspot group does a really great job. So they start with a month of onboarding that literally everybody in the company, whether they're salespeople or devs or G&A people, doing stuff in the accounting group, goes through this month-long onboarding program called Grow. And it's really super efficient and does a lot of what I was sort of talking about with ADP, with the manila envelope, right?
Right. Oh,
And,
right. Like
and it,
dragging
it
them through the
basically
pain.
says, okay, here, pretend you're an enablement person. Here's a ton of marketing content, and here's a ton of training content, and here's a ton of this other stuff. Let's go create our own instance of the platform, and let's create this in a compelling way that actually, you'd be able to deliver this to a set of new sales reps, or to a sales team, or for a product launch or something like this, right? And so it really grounds the entire company first in that sort of context of what that problem is that you're solving. And then obviously we use our own fantastic technology to do it, and so that really facilitates the effectiveness of that. Then there's a few additional weeks of sales onboarding after that, using the same platform, but then spinning from sort of I'm going to create it for this fictional group back to more of a traditional, let's learn about the personas and the specific sales tracks and the specific materials you'll be using, sort of the sales process and all that sort of stuff.
This is funny because like everything, I like view everything through like the lens of like my 6-year-old, and all I'm thinking about is like a pile of like papers. It kind of feels like arts and crafts in this case, where it's just like, here's all the PDFs that marketing has created for the product, like, and here's these decks and whatever, and like, here you go, buddy.
Here you go read them. Right.
Make it coherent, right? And so, as like in this case, like whether it's a CSM or an SDR or an AE or whatever, like, new enterprise seller at Highspot, now they're sitting there like, oh my gosh, like, I've got like 20 different pieces of digital collateral, and like they probably got emailed to me, and they're actually probably you could probably like do it on like hard, like there's like easy mode where like it's all like in a Google Drive folder, and then there's like medium mode where like it all gets like emailed to you, but it's all like 10 attachments on a single PDF, or sorry, on a single email. And then there's like hard mode where it's like 6 different emails with like different subject lines, and it's like, okay, cool, like figure this out.
That's
and
not
so
just hard mode, that's real mode. That's actually what we like traditionally most companies do to their reps. Like, hey, we're gonna have this thing, we're gonna email you every week a bunch of stuff, and you got to remember when it was emailed to you and to go back and reference it.
Right. And it's like forwarded, and it's like, forward : RE : forward, it's like something like your grandpa sent you. That but I think this is like, I think you, Zach, you really nailed it earlier around like, think about like what the like learning outcome is that you're trying to achieve, and then facilitate that through better technology. And I think actually what you're describing right there is just like a good way of like good product development as well, which is like, hey, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? And then and like, because that problem exists in the world, like in the case of Atrium, it's just like, hey, look, like, sales managers have 6, 8, 10, 12 reps that are reporting to them. We just want to help them do a better job of managing those folks by data. Here's the current way that happens and why it's unsatisfactory. And so I think that like everyone here today could probably think through that as relates to their reps, is like, how do you make it such that they can better appreciate the like the pains that customer, and different personas in that customer as well too. Because I think that's another thing, like use Atrium as an example, and I imagine actually this is probably true at Highspot as well. anytime you have like multi-persona like users, it's really important to understand those different personas. Like in our case, there's the sales manager, SDR manager, what have you, sales leader, like who struggles to interpret the like wall of charts or what have you. There's a certain empathy associated with them. Then there's the sales operations person who is usually pretty fluent at that sort of stuff and also good at construction and what have you. But they have a different set of points, which is of course just like being peppered for
Right.
for new reports and new dashboard interpretation and what have you. And I would imagine in the case of like an LMS and a digital content management solution, there's like the product marketer who creates things and then no one uses them if they're not findable. There's the enablement person who's being inundated by a bunch of different product marketers who are like, you need my thing, put my thing at the front of the deck, put my thing at the front of the deck.
Even the product marketers who are being inundated. It's very much like the ops teams that are being inundated by sales managers who want to report, but by the time they get the report created and back to the sales manager, like the sales manager probably is on to the next thing and isn't thinking about it anymore, because that's just kind of how the brains work. That's how our brains work, right? It's very similar. Like the sales reps that are going to the product marketing team saying, I need a deck for the thing. And so that goes into the product marketing engine. And 3 months later, when it comes out, like they're not in the situation anymore where they need the slide for the thing anymore. And so then it doesn't get used because it was asked for a situation that was 6 months ago. And you end up with the same black market trade of marketing.
Can you send me that deck? Hey, hey Zach, can you send me that deck?
The one that you presented at the last quarterly thing. Like, can I have that? There's like a couple slides in there. Right, that's right here.
I've got some decks. Did you want some?
Yeah, exactly. And the marketing people are just they're just going, oh my god, there's clip art on that slide. There's actual clip art on the slide.
And Comic Sans, obviously.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
You know what the thing that I've been doing recently? It's absolutely been like, actually, now that you make me think about this, it's something like Highspot and other content management folks are gonna have to think about. So generative AI. Right. Oh, generative AI. Woo. Right. But like, okay, cool. There's all the text-based stuff. And actually, we've been doing a ton of stuff around like synthesis and recommendations on sales management. But the image stuff is so much fun. It's ridiculous. Because like, again, 6-year-olds, Pokemon, just like coming out of the ears and whatever, you can synthesize Pokemon. Like, oh, I want to see Pikachu, I want to see Pikachu like attacking the Golden Gate Bridge. All right, go. And so like we've been using this in our marketing. So now instead of having like clip art, you're gonna have like generative AI stuff.
Generative AI art, yeah. Or generative AI written emails that maybe you're good, maybe you're not. Right.
Yeah, maybe are pretty mid. Well, I want to change gears a little bit because I really appreciate talking about the kind of the onboarding and making sure that your reps are like really have like great empathy, and I think that like at Highspot, I think I know that you've done a lot there, and then but like most recently you've been focused on the enterprise side of things, and like that's just like a different kind of like animal to manage, right? Like you were talking about ADP, SMB, velocity before you kind of, and obviously Highspot has a mid-market motion, or like commercial mid-market motion, but also like these larger organizations like the ADPs of the world who probably have their legacy content management solution or legacy LMS solution. Like they're now starting to come around and be like, yeah, maybe we should get like a modern one that isn't super jank. And like those sales motions are far more involved, and the dollar values are much higher. And so the humans who end up selling those are a special breed of human who's been around the block and like are thinking about all the politics inside the organization and all that sort of stuff. But those folks, managing those folks is a little bit different than managing the 28-year-old or the 30-year-old commercial AE or mid-market AE. Maybe you can kind of talk a little bit about like the idiosyncrasies of enterprise rep management for folks who contend with that.
Yeah, sure. Well, and it's interesting. My experience with it is that it's like that senior seller, that sort of that journeyman IC is definitely a paradigm that is there. But
yeah,
the ability to work with that person is part of it. But I think if you sort of focus on that exclusively, I think it actually misses a little bit, because in reality, I think that there's a huge diversity, right? So
Sure, there's different sub-personas of
right,
enterprise
right,
sellers.
right, and not only like just in sort of seniority and sort of trips around the sun, right? But just in just in sort of motivational stuff, in all sorts of it turns out to be a much more diverse team, both from motivational and sort of general demographic standpoint. The teams most recently I was working with at Highspot, might have somebody who was late 20s, 27, 28, 20, 30, who's like just an absolute ambitious, rock star. And the way that we did things there is kind of interesting. Like, people sort of, generally diverted into leadership before they ever got to AEs, right? They became leadership in the ADR org or in other parts of the company. Mm-hmm. And so people who are coming in, even as like 20, 23, 24, 25-year-old AEs had already sort of self-selected out of a leadership track to a large extent, right? And so you had sort of this, I want to be an excellent IC mindset, even, not everybody was trying to be a manager, put it that way, right?
Yeah.
Like, almost nobody was. And so but you had this diversity of sort of approach, and so you had to be very sort of flexible and dexterous to manage that, highly ambitious 28, 29-year-old differently from somebody who is like you said, has been around a long time. And if they wanted to be in leadership, they would have done it a long time ago, perfectly capable of doing it. And what they really want to do is sell and probably be left alone a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And probably, like the stuff that we might use, as sales leaders with younger, less tenured sales teams, think mid 20s, late 20s, whatever, of like, okay, think about what you want your life to look like in 10 years, and let's design a plan so that you can get to the income, so that you can do the things that you're trying to do. Like, that person's already done these things, right? And so trying to sort of use those traditional motivational tactics doesn't really work, right? And so I think
what are better approaches there?
So in my experience, it's really about treating your senior sellers as peers and not as people who, work for you or people to be managed, right? But they're peers who are doing a different job than you are. They're doing a job that's as senior as you are, as the manager or as the VP, or quite honestly, sometimes as the CRO, right? Like we had reps who were responsible for large chunks of the total nut, right? And so that individual and their ability to carry a conversation at a very senior level at a very huge global company, right? That person has the same chops as and sometimes even better as you as the leader, right? And so really looking at those individuals and sort of driving that interaction from that personal perspective, and thinking of yourself as somebody how can I add value to this individual? How can I add value to their sales process? How can I eliminate barriers? How can I help them marshal resources? How can I make sure that the entire organization is selling as a village, right? How can I make sure that we've got bow-tied multi-threading going on, right? Which that one, right? Like making sure that everybody on your organization is connected with everybody in their organization. Kind of looks like a bow tie if you draw it out.
I've never heard that phrase before, but I like that. Like, essentially, it's like executive pairing and what have you, but not in a like a catch as catch can sort of way, but in a more exhaustive, more complete fashion.
Well, and proactive, right? Proactive and that you're as the leader marshaling the organizational will and consistent processes to make sure that happens.
Yeah. One of the books that I really enjoyed reading from a management standpoint was Corey Bray's 5 Secrets of the Sales Coach, because it's a narrative, it's a parable. It's funny, like when we do a lot of book giveaways here at Atrium for like pipe gen functionality, like, and so like it's a very right brain because it's like very narrative centric. And then of course like our whole company and our software is like very left brain, trying to bring it, like make it more right brain with a bunch of with product functionality. But like cracking the sales management code and Michelle Vazana's crushing quotas, very much more applied data driven sales management. But 5 Secrets to the Sales Coach is really great because one of the things, like A, it's a parable, B, it really kind of like opened my eyes. I remember it was like, at this point, it was like 4 years ago, reading it, and it opened my eyes to the notion that like sales management is very akin to selling itself. um, and that means like having empathy for the persona that you're talking to, whether it's the 28-year-old ambitious, like I was a mid-market rep for 2 years, and before that I was an SMB rep for 2 years, and before that I was an SDR for 2 years, etc. That's one persona. And then there's the other persona, is the senior journeyman or what have you. The thing that they kind of popped to mind there was like, just understand, like, one, doing good discovery as a leader, and kind of like kind of the directed questioning there, because you see this, like, you can't just like show, as a seller you can't show up to some graybeard like VP, like, I don't know, use us as an example, VP of sales operations, be like, yeah, you're probably thinking about this wrong, like this, versus like, one of the things that we've often found in our customers is da 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 da. Does that ring any bells right there? And like, obviously we're directing them in a certain direction there, but in such a way that they can kind of come to those conclusions themselves. And I feel that sort of thing works really well when you have folks who have been around the block, because as managers, like, we can't be like completely hands off, because that's not really like, that's not why we're getting paid the the medium bucks, because like you want to de-risk things, what have you, but at the same time contend with the fact that you can't just be like, oh look man, like you're pretty single threaded on this deal right here, like, get your act together, right? Because like that person's not going to react really positively to that, versus like, hey, I was like kind of observing da 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 da, right? And then like let them kind of like own it themselves.
Right. Well, yeah, humans don't like to be told things, and don't like to be told that they're doing things wrong, right? And so doing that tends to entrench people in whatever it is that they're doing, right? And so and I think the other thing is that human brains are kind of bad at math and really aren't good. Like, you can present a bunch of numbers, like I could tell you, hey, Pete, you've got a much lower probability of closing this deal unless you're multi-threaded. We've got, we can see that, on people who are multi-threaded deals, they've got, about a 40% increase in their win rate than versus people who are single-threaded, right?
This is very good. This is a very good left-brained argument.
Yeah, right. Or like, Pete, I can see that you're not converting your first conversations into second conversations very effectively, and we know that the conversion rate from step 1 to step 2 is really important. And I can see here that right now you don't have as many first or second meetings on the books, and most of your opportunities don't have meetings scheduled, and that's going to resonate with you like exactly 0, right? But if I told you like, oh, actually, hey, I'm looking at this thing, and this reminds me so much of this other rep that I was working with. It's crazy. Like, so
crazy. Not you.
So there was this rep I was working with, and she was like super talented, but man, it just was not clicking for her. And we looked together and we noticed one thing, and what that was is that if you pull up all of her ops, she only had next meetings scheduled with like 2 or 3 of the 15, 20 ops. And so what we did was this, like, and it was kind of crazy. Like, literally, we picked out this one thing. Like, this is what you're going to do. You're going to focus your entire energy on getting another meeting booked with every single one of these rep or with these opportunities. Well, geez, Zach, what are we going to say? Oh, I don't know. Just pull up the next one on the list and think of a good reason to get a meeting scheduled with them, and your brain will take over from there, and you'll figure out a good reason. And then, so anyway, she did this for like 2 weeks, and guess what?
It's crazy.
It was absolutely amazing. Like her numbers went through the roof. She actually made, she was missing quota. She actually made President's Club that year. And actually, do you know who that person is? Yeah, that's so and so in the chair over there.
The
Who's
VP of
right now you're like, oh, I should always have next meetings on the phone, right? So that narrative, that like our brains are keyed in to listen to stories, right? And stories that have beginnings and endings, and stories that have beginnings, middles, and endings, and where there's good guys and there's bad guys, right? And there's some sort of a conflict that resolves. Like our brains are tuned into that. And you know,
I love it.
if you can use the data to like point you to which story you should tell to get the person to
Right.
do what you need them to do, right?
Well, this is like selling.
That was actually a true story, but it's funny. It wasn't me working with the rep. It was me working with the rep's manager.
All right, to help them.
Well, and they're like,
stop like
literally, they
bludgeoning.
were at the end of their rope. They were at their end of their rope. They wanted to exit this person from the business. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. This person should be really good. They should be killing it, like, right? And so it was, yeah, true story.
I love that, because I mean it's very similar. This is reminding me of like LMS and CMS requirements, because what you want is reps to have like an arsenal of stories. Like, oh, I hear what you're saying. You know, let me like. I know another SDR leader who had, you know, 6 junior SDR managers under them, and they were also losing their mind because, you know, sales operations wasn't supporting them, and they needed those 6 junior sales SDR managers to manage in a consistent fashion. And you know what they found, blah blah blah, blah, right? And but like it needs to be like an arsenal of like a half dozen or a dozen of those. And I like what you're describing there around, you know, you need that as a manager as well. One thing that this is something that we've really been focused on over the last probably 18 months here at Atrium, is like one of the things that we've been doing is really going substantially up market, because one of the things that we found was larger organizations end up with this situation where they have like, you know, as soon as you get like 5 managers, especially when you get to like 10 or like 20, having them manage in a consistent way ends up being a really important thing. That's the first thing. The second thing that we found was that, you know, we were starting to cap out on the number of sales managers who had a, you know, a metrical analytical bent. And this is actually where, like a lot of our AI stuff has come in, because what we found was that it's literally what you're talking about. Like humans think in words, most humans, right? Some people have like done a good job of like, you know, getting analytical over time, or maybe they did it in like, you know, undergrad or like high school, and like, you know, they're comfy with Excel, etc. But one of the things that I've kind of reflected on is, if you and I was reading something about this last week, when I was on vacation, about like, you know, humans have been like speaking language for probably around like 1 million years or so, a couple 100,000 years or like 1,000,000 years or so. Written language, right? So like, you know, there's spoken, like you know, like grunt and orc, you and me, like talking back and forth. And then writing has only been around for like probably like, you know, 10, yeah, exactly, like 10,000, 20,000 years or what have you. And then you only get to numbers in the last like couple thousand years. And so if you think about that from the standpoint of like how long humans have been around, and ultimately what we're doing is we're trying to help humans be more effective, our sellers, our SDRs, et cetera, then like bludgeoning them. So first of all, like sending them like gargantuan emails, it's kind of like, hey, remember text has only been around for like 10,000 years or so, like right, like, and then yeah, that gargantuan email is like full of all these like
well, and yeah, I mean, the other thing is that like if especially within sales, right, people who end up in sales usually don't end up there because they were really good with the long form stuff in college. Like they were the social chair at their fraternity, and they thought maybe they wanted to go to law school, but maybe med school, but then maybe, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to go get a sales job. And that's not, I mean, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, right? But when I went in, that was literally what it was. And so
they're like communicators and empaths.
Right. Well, and there's I at some point I'm gonna do a PhD, and I'm gonna write a dissertation about how overrepresented ADHD is in professional sales. Right. Um, I like
You kind of have to be. You're managing 20 ops.
right. And so anyway, it just salespeople don't respond well to that long form stuff. And you kind of have to let machine, like the computers are really good with numbers, right? And so if you let the computers be good with numbers and let the human brain kind of take those numbers and change them into a story that other human brains can connect to, I think that's where the magic is, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that I think what we have found is helping our manager, because our primary user is like a sales manager, an SDR manager. Like the second level leader is more concerned about like enabling their managers, their like 4 managers or 10 managers or whatever to manage consistently. And like, sales operations and what have you is they're a stakeholder and usually a purchasing persona for us, but like they're not in their day to day, right? Because like they're often their like VI or what have you, but they care. And so making sure that the managers who are humans, right, and not particularly, and I think the same thing is true with like sellers, making sure that the sellers can learn like those narratives, like have the right tooling, or sorry, have the right asset available to them for the right, use case, and not like, I mean, I remember this when I was like a holy terror after my company got acquired by Monster, because I'm a product marketer by background, like 15 years ago or so. And we had this like ungodly, actually I remember talking with Robert about this, with this ungodly SharePoint site for the Monster sales organization in order to sell Talent Bin. And it was just like this like gargantuan like PDF where you would just like Command F across it. And of course, like that didn't work. So what would happen is like people would be like blowing me up on, I forget what the chat like software that we had was, but like imagine 500 sellers blowing me up as like the pure subject matter expert. And at the time I was just kind of like, oh my God, what's wrong with these people? But the right approach there is like to have empathy around like, how do you micro chunk it? How do you make it available to them, et cetera, et cetera? And it can't be like these like gargantuan blocks of text, because like they're just not going to consume those.
Yeah. Well, and how do you think about it in a way like that like you said is empathetic to the situation that they're in? Right. They're not thinking about here's this document of this storage system and how are things filed like the Dewey Decimal System. Right. They're not going to go to the card catalog to try to find the book. Right. They need a thing for a conversation that's coming up, in half an hour, and oh crap, I got to pull this deck together. Right. Or
They're
I've got
just clenching and they're like,
in the morning and I got to pull this thing together. Like put yourself in that mode and think, okay, if you're that person looking for the thing at that moment, what's the first thing you're gonna, where would you? It's almost like UX design, right? It's like, what would the uninitiated like want to click on when they come to your website, and what's the natural way to do that, right?
Well, I know that speaking of kind of like empathy for sellers and what have you, I think everybody right now is kind of adjusting to a much more problematic selling environment right now. Especially, I mean, depends on the persona of the organization, or the organizational personas you sell to. But like, I think maybe a year ago, things really started getting tight around around smaller venture-backed startups, really kind of like clamping down on any sort of spending. And eventually that makes its way up into larger organizations as well. What sort of changes have you seen in how that modifies managing managing your teams, how we have to reset rep expectations from certain expectations that have maybe come to roost over the past like 5 years, and maybe they've forgotten what the 5 years before that looked like, or maybe they weren't even like in the professional workforce 5 years before that. Like, how do you do that?
Well, I think so the part about keeping sales people engaged and focused and their spirits up, right? Like being able to go out there and tie on your high top sales shoes and be successful every day is there's a huge mental aspect to that, right? And so,
Yeah, totally.
you know, a lot of that is about helping people focus on their locus of control, like what can they control, right? And if they're controlling what they can control, then ultimately, you know, they're going to be able to you know, I guess, be more confident in their approach, right? But I think generally, you know, to answer the first part of your question, what we're seeing is, and this is certainly not a revolutionary statement, but deals take longer, they're more complex, they've got more buyers that didn't used to be in the deals before, right? There's more scrutiny on spend. And so, you know, as a leader or an ops individual, you know, really what that means is there's like more lag time between any inputs that you put into your sales engine and when the output happens, right? It's like the difference between driving a car and, you know, you turn your wheel and the car turns, and you drive you know, we used to be driving a small boat, and so, you know, we'd make a turn, and, you know, it takes a second,
Sounds
and
like
then
a
it starts to
tanker.
turn. And now we're driving a big boat, and so you're trying to make a 2-degree correction. You make the 2-degree correction, and you're wondering, wait, why isn't this thing going where
Why
I want
haven't
it
we
to go?
moved?
You make another 2 degrees, like, oh, geez, it's still not turning. Another one, and then by the time, you know, all the water flows through and hits the, you know, rudder, then you just turned yourself 10 degrees, and now you got to swing it all, and now you're just driving ditch to ditch to ditch to ditch to ditch, right? And so I think it's really important to think about that time lag and to not drive ditch to ditch, to not overcorrect, but to realize that things are going to take a little bit longer to get purchase, and give it that time.
Yeah. Yep. That's something that I think we all have to like contend with right now. Elliot, are you here to kick us out?
I am, unfortunately. I want to thank everyone for attending. A big shout out to our sponsor, Atrium, for today's Fireside Chat. It was wonderful. Going to redrop all the great links that were mentioned throughout. Big thank you to Pete and Zach for providing today's content. Recordings and key takeaways are going to be available on our page shortly. Don't forget to check out our upcoming events, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Zach. See
Take
ya.
care.
Thanks,
Good to see
everybody.
you. Bye. Thanks, Elliot.